What started as a simple gate upgrade turned into a full-blown 911 emergency call. But when HOA Karen tried to ruin my wife's reputation, she froze the moment she found out who we really are. Life in our lakeside cabin had always felt peaceful, almost like a retreat from the chaos of the outside world. The mornings were quiet, filled with the sound of birdsong and the occasional ripple of water as fish leapt in the lake. For us, this cabin wasn't just a house. It was our sanctuary. That's why when my wife suggested changing the old rickety front gate, I thought it was the most reasonable idea in the world. The original gate was flimsy, weather-worn, and frankly didn't match the beauty of our home. It sagged on its hinges, creaked when the wind blew, and gave the impression that we didn't care much about appearances. My wife wanted to design something stronger, something that blended in with the rustic wood and stone style of our cabin. She spent weeks sketching designs, choosing natural wood, and making sure it was both secure and aesthetically pleasing. Her goal wasn't just to upgrade a gate. She wanted to make our home safer, more welcoming, and more fitting for the environment we loved so much. When the work was finally done, the transformation was incredible. The new gate wasn't flashy or over the top. It was elegant and simple. A natural wooden frame reinforced with sturdy iron hinges gave it both charm and durability. To us, it felt like the finishing touch on a dream home. We stood back, admired it, and smiled. It was perfect. But of course, perfection is subjective. To us, it was an improvement. To someone else, it was apparently a crime. That someone was our HOA President, better known in the neighborhood as a Karen. Karen was infamous around the community for being controlling, loud, and always ready to enforce rules that didn't even exist. She thrived on confrontation, walking around with her clipboard like she was the queen of the neighborhood. While most people learned to ignore her antics, we quickly discovered that ignoring wasn't an option when she set her sights on you. The first time she noticed the gate, I could see the storm clouds forming on her face. She stood at the end of our driveway, glaring at the wooden frame as if it personally offended her existence. My wife and I were sipping coffee on the porch when we spotted her scribbling furiously on her clipboard. It looks like we're about to get a visit. My wife sighed, half amused, half annoyed. I shrugged it off at first. After all, what could she possibly say? There was no rule about gates in the HOA handbook. I had checked twice. But Karen wasn't someone who needed rules to feel powerful. She made up authority where none existed. Within minutes, she was storming up the driveway, heels clicking against the gravel like a ticking time bomb. Clipboard in one hand, pen in the other. She didn't even bother with a polite greeting. She pointed directly at the gate and declared, "This needs to go. Immediately." I blinked, trying not to laugh. "What do you mean? We just installed it. It's safe, it's neat, and it's well within our property line." Karen scowled, flipping through her papers. It's not in the approved design of the community. All gates must match the standard." My wife raised an eyebrow. "There is no standard for gates. The handbook doesn't say a word about them. Would you like me to show you?" Karen didn't care about logic. She wasn't here for facts. She was here for power. "If you don't remove it, I'll have no choice but to escalate this matter." That was the moment we realized what we were dealing with. This wasn't about a gate at all. It was about control. And Karen wasn't going to stop until she proved she had it. At the time, we didn't know just how far she was willing to go. We thought it would end with a nasty letter or maybe a fine. We couldn't have imagined that within days, police cars with flashing lights would be in front of our home, and my wife would be in handcuffs. All because of this so-called a gate dispute. The morning after Karen's little inspection at the end of our driveway, we thought maybe, just maybe, she'd gotten it out of her system. We had brushed off her dramatic declaration that our new gate needed to go immediately because honestly, it sounded ridiculous. Surely we told ourselves she wouldn't take it any further. After all, there were no HOA rules being broken. We had checked the handbook cover to cover. There was nothing about gates, nothing about materials, nothing about approved designs. We were in the clear. But if there's one thing everyone in the neighborhood knew about Karen, it was this. Logic never stood in her way. She wasn't interested in rules. She was interested in control. And when she couldn't control something, she turned it into a battle. By mid-afternoon, we saw her again. Same outfit as before, blazer, slacks, clipboard under her arm. She marched down the street with the confidence of someone who believed the world revolved around her. Neighbors sitting on their porches gave her that all-too-familiar look, a mix of sympathy and exasperation. They knew when Karen had her sights set on you, peace was no longer an option. She came right up to our front door and started knocking. No, pounding, like she was serving us with court papers. My wife opened the door, calm and collected as always, while I stayed just behind her, coffee mug in hand. "There you are," Karen said, her voice sharp. She didn't wait to be invited in. She just stepped onto our porch like it was her personal property. She pointed toward the gate with the authority of a judge handing down a sentence. "That needs to be removed immediately. You are in violation of HOA regulations." My wife frowned but kept her composure. Karen, we've looked at the HOA handbook. There are no regulations about gates. None. We double-checked. Karen flipped her clipboard open with a dramatic flourish, though we both knew there was nothing written there that backed up her claim. "You are disrupting the uniform appearance of this community. The board will not allow it." I couldn't help myself. I chuckled. "The board, or you?" Karen's face tightened, clearly offended. "I'm the president of the board. When I say something needs to be corrected, it is not a suggestion." That's when my wife stepped forward, her voice firm but calm. "Karen, with all due respect, you don't make the rules. The HOA guidelines do. Well, the guidelines do. And if you want to push this, you'll need to show us the exact rule we've broken. Otherwise, we're not tearing down something we've worked hard to improve." Karen's eyes narrowed. She wasn't used to resistance. Most neighbors gave in just to avoid the headache of fighting her. But we weren't most neighbors. She could feel that, and it only made her more determined. "You're making a mistake," she snapped. "If you don't comply, I'll escalate this matter further." "Don't test me." I folded my arms, meeting her glare with calm confidence. "But do what you think you need to do, Karen, but make sure it's legal." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she turned on her heel, storming back down the driveway. The sound of her shoes hitting the gravel was almost as loud as her voice had been. My wife and I exchanged a glance, half disbelief, half amusement. Surely she wouldn't actually take this further, but we underestimated her. Karen wasn't bluffing. Just an hour later, we saw her again. This time, she wasn't alone. She had her phone out, speaking loudly into it as she paced near our gate, describing us like we were dangerous criminals. "I need an officer sent immediately," she barked into the phone. "There are residents here who are violating HOA standards and refusing to comply. They're aggressive, they're disrespectful, and I feel threatened." We were standing just a few feet away, stunned, listening to her twist the situation into something out of a crime drama. My wife whispered, "She can't be serious." But Karen was serious. He glanced at my wife, then back at me, and I could tell he was reconsidering. Meanwhile, Karen was losing her grip. Her face flushed red. Her voice grew shriller. She pointed at me now, yelling, "He's manipulating you. Don't listen to him. They're both liars." But the more she shouted, the less credible she sounded. The neighbors watching from the sidewalk began to murmur, shaking their heads. A few even spoke up quietly. "This is ridiculous. It's just a gate." I kept my focus on the sheriff, speaking evenly, logically, like a man who had nothing to hide. Inside, of course, I was furious at Karen for humiliating my wife, furious at the absurdity of the situation. But I knew that the calmer I stayed, the clearer it became who was reasonable and who was not. And slowly, I saw the balance start to shift. The sheriff's hand moved away from his belt. His partner nodded. My wife, though still cuffed, stood a little taller, reassured by the fact that I was not going to let this go unanswered. What Karen didn't realize was that her little power play was already unraveling. The officers were beginning to see the truth. And soon enough, she was about to learn exactly who she was really dealing with. The tension in the air was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My wife still stood in handcuffs, Karen still shouting from the sidelines like a self-appointed prosecutor. And the sheriff looked caught in the middle, unsure whether to backtrack or press forward. I knew this circus had gone on long enough. It was time to put an end to it, and the only way to do that was to reveal the truth Karen had no idea about. I took a slow step closer to the sheriff, keeping my tone calm but firm. "Officer, you need to understand something," I said. "This isn't just about a gate. This isn't even about the HOA." This is about the misuse of authority and you're being pulled into it. Karen scoffed loudly, rolling her eyes. Don't listen to him. He's trying to confuse you. They think they're above the rules. The sheriff shot her a look, clearly tired of her constant interruptions. Mom, let me handle this. Oh, that was my moment. I reached into my jacket pocket slowly and deliberately so the officers could see I wasn't doing anything suspicious. I pulled out a leather wallet, not just any wallet, but one that carried more weight than Karen could ever imagine. With a practice motion, I flipped it open and revealed my credentials. The badge glinted in the sunlight, unmistakable and undeniable. The sheriff's eyes widened slightly. His partner leaned closer for a better look, then nodded with recognition. Their entire posture shifted in that instant, from skeptical authority figures to respectful professionals. Karen, however, was oblivious. She stomped her foot again, her voice dripping with arrogance. What is that supposed to prove? A driver's license? A library card? I don't care who you are in violation, and I demand you enforce the rules. I turned toward her slowly, letting her stew in her ignorance for just a moment longer. Then I spoke, my voice steady but cutting. Karen, what you don't realize is that my work, my authority, and my background don't just carry weight in this neighborhood. They carry weight in this entire county. When I show these officers my credentials, it means they know exactly who I am, what I stand for, and why your accusations carry no legal ground. The sheriff spoke up, his tone firmer now. He's right, ma'am. This is not a criminal matter. It never was. And based on what I'm seeing here, I'd say you've wasted valuable police resources over a personal dispute. Karen froze. For the first time all afternoon, the confidence drained from her face. The smug grin disappeared, replaced by shock and confusion. She stammered, "OAW, what do you mean? You can't just ignore me. I'm the HOA President." The sheriff crossed his arms, unimpressed. And he's someone whose authority outweighs your clipboard. If you had a legitimate complaint, it should have gone through the HOA board, not through 911. Filing false or exaggerated reports can land you in serious trouble. The neighbors watching from the street began whispering louder now, their expressions turning from curiosity to delight. Phone stayed up, recording every second of Karen's downfall. My wife, still in cuffs, raised her eyebrows at Karen as if to say, "So, still feeling powerful?" I gestured toward my wife. Now, if you don't mind, I think it's time these handcuffs came off." Without hesitation, the sheriff nodded to his partner, who quickly unlocked them. My wife rubbed her wrists, relief and indignation mixing on her face. The moment the cuffs clicked open, Karen's knees seemed to wobble as though the ground had been pulled out from beneath her. Her voice, once so loud and commanding, was now barely above a whisper. I didn't know," I said sharply. "You didn't, and that's exactly the problem. You assumed, you abused your position, and you thought no one would stand up to you." For the first time in the history of this neighborhood, Karen was speechless. What she didn't realize yet, though, was that her problems were only beginning. The real fallout was still to come. White heavy checkmark that's .5 fully expanded into 600 words with the dramatic reveal. Do you want me to now continue with the final .6, the fallout, in the same expanded storytelling style? You said, 6ChatGPT said, perfect thumbs up. Let's now finish with .6. The fallout in about 600 words, wrapping up the entire HOA drama with full intensity. 6. The fallout, 600 words. The silence that followed the unmasking of my identity was deafening. For once, Karen's voice was gone, her usual weapon of choice stripped away by the sheer weight of reality. Neighbors stood rooted to the spot, their phones still raised, capturing the downfall of the woman who had tormented nearly everyone in the community at one point or another. The sheriff, now clearly annoyed at having his time wasted, directed his words at her with the authority she thought belonged only to her. "Mom, do you understand what you've done here?" he asked flatly. Calling 911 for a civil issue isn't just a bad decision, It's an abuse of emergency You put officers at risk, wasted taxpayer dollars, and humiliated innocent people. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted around, desperately seeking backup from her supposed supporters, but none came. The same neighbors who once bowed to her intimidation now smirked, whispered, and shook their heads in quiet satisfaction. For years, she had bullied them with her clipboard and rule book. Now, the curtain had finally been pulled back. The sheriff continued, his tone sharper. If this happens again, you could face charges for filing a false report. Do I make myself clear? Karen nodded stiffly, her face pale. She looked nothing like the iron-fisted HOA president she had pretended to be just 30 minutes earlier. She looked small, defeated, powerless. Meanwhile, my wife finally stood tall beside me, free from the cuffs and stronger than ever. She looked Karen dead in the eye and said, "All this over a gate? You wanted to destroy our peace, and instead you destroyed your own credibility." The crowd murmured their approval. Some even clapped softly, as if they were watching the final act of a play where the villain finally gets what's coming to them. Karen tried one last time to salvage her dignity. She puffed out her chest and muttered, "This isn't over. I'm still the HOA president." I didn't even raise my voice, but my words cut deeper than any shout could. Oh, it's over, because now everyone here knows the truth. And when the next HOA election comes around, you'll find out exactly how much support you have left. That landed harder than any handcuff or fine could. Now the curtain had finally been pulled back. The sheriff continued, his tone sharper. If this happens again, you could face charges for filing a false report. Do I make myself clear? Karen nodded stiffly, her face pale. Face pale. She looked nothing like the iron-fisted HOA president she had pretended to be just 30 minutes earlier. She looked small, defeated, powerless. Meanwhile, my wife finally stood tall beside me, free from the cuffs and stronger than ever. She looked Karen dead in the eye and said, "All this over a gate? You wanted to destroy our peace, and instead, you destroyed your own credibility." The crowd murmured their approval. Some even clapped softly, as if they were watching the final act of a play where the villain finally gets what's coming to them. Karen tried one last time to salvage her dignity. She puffed out her chest and muttered, "This isn't over. I'm still the HOA president." I didn't even raise my voice, but my words cut deeper than any shout could. It's over, because now everyone here knows the truth. And when the next HOA election comes around, you'll find out exactly how much support you have left. That landed harder than any handcuff or fine could. Karen's eyes flickered nervously to the neighbors, who suddenly looked like a jury preparing to deliver a unanimous verdict. Her authority had been broken, not by force, but by exposure. The sheriff and his partner finally returned to their patrol car, shaking their heads at the absurdity of it all. Before leaving, the sheriff looked at me and said quietly, "You handled that better than most would. Have a good evening." The message behind his words was clear: respect given, respect earned. As the police car pulled away, the crowd slowly dispersed, but the buzz of conversation didn't stop. Neighbors approached us, some with pats on the back, others with words of relief. About time someone stood up to her, one man said. "We've all been waiting for this day," another woman added. Karen, however, slunk back toward her house, her once proud stride replaced by a hurried shuffle. For the first time in years, she wasn't the center of attention, but the subject of ridicule. Her downfall wasn't just public, it was permanent. Later that evening, my wife and I sat on our cabin porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The gate she had installed stood proudly in place, A simple improvement that had sparked a storm. We laughed quietly at the absurdity of it all, but there was also a sense of peace we hadn't felt before. The truth had set us free, not just from Karen's latest stunt, but from the fear of her future ones. She had revealed herself to be exactly what everyone suspected, a bully hiding behind a title, and now that title no longer meant anything. The fallout wasn't just about Karen losing face, it was about the neighborhood gaining freedom. From that day forward, people stopped bowing to her intimidation. Meetings were run more fairly, decisions were questioned openly, and her reign of control began to crumble. As for us, we didn't justice, gained respect. Respect from our neighbors, respect from the officers, and most importantly, respect for ourselves for standing firm in the face of hostility. Karen had called 911, thinking she would humiliate us. Instead, she humiliated herself. And in the end, that was the truest justice of all.